How good truly are the Washington Wizards? That's what we need to talk about today. The Washington Wizards are one of the harder teams to truly analyze and gauge of how good they truly are and how good they're truly going to be after their start of the 2021-22 NBA season. The Wizards have had a 5-3 start, which saw them start 5-1. Have now lost games to Atlanta and Toronto. They also lost to Brooklyn, so no losses against terrible teams. And they've beaten Toronto, Indiana, Boston, Atlanta, and Boston. Good teams. But the Wizards are built in a way that could see them be a very strong regular season team, but not necessarily a team that has longevity into the playoffs. And so I want to talk about this Wizards team, what I expect from them this upcoming season, as well as in the playoffs if they do get there, and some of the concerns I have about this group. The Washington Wizards have been a very good regular season team so far, and I don't doubt that they can continue to do that for the rest of the year, and I think they are going to be a legitimate threat to push for the playoffs via the play-in games. But ultimately, I do have concerns about this Wizards team being able to do anything more than that, because I do think there are some teams that could fall into the play-in games that are good enough to potentially pull off an upset in this Eastern Conference because the conference is so deep. Because I don't feel overly confident about any of the teams at the top of the conference other than maybe the Bucks or the Nets if they get Kyrie back. Other than that, I feel like everyone is pretty beatable by anyone else in the conference who may get into the playoffs. But for the Wizards, I don't know if they have that upside. And I'm going to talk about why. I think this is a team that's really built for the regular season. And what I mean by that is they have a lot of depth. When you're talking about good NBA players that are on this team, you have Bradley Beal, Montrez, Dinwiddie, Kuzma, KCP, Raul Neto, Gafford, Bertans, Avdija, Aaron Holiday, Corey Kispert. There's 10 plus good players on this team. That's not to mention Thomas Bryant, who hasn't played yet. Not to mention Rui Hachimura, who hasn't played yet. So this team can run 12 deep during the regular season and put out 12 really good NBA players that can impact this team in a positive way. They have their star in Bradley Beal, and they have a nice chunk of guys around him. But I do have concerns about how that team can then translate to the playoffs. Do they have a good enough 8-man rotation, 9-man rotation that they're going to run in the playoffs relative to other teams' 8 or 9-man rotation? And do they have enough offensive punch outside of Bradley Beal to get it done? Because ultimately, when teams start trapping Bradley Beal, when they start doubling Bradley Beal, do they have enough to get the job done? That's a concern I have with this group, no doubt about it. This has been a solid offensive team so far at this point in time in the season, but not an amazing one. They're 15th in the league, and not too far off defensively, 13th in defensive rating. And I think that's probably a pretty fair spot for them in the regular season. I think they're about a mid-of-the-run team in the regular season just because of how much depth they have. But ultimately, when you get to the playoffs, how well does it translate? Montrezl Harrell has been arguably their second best player so far this year. We know how much he can become irrelevant in the playoffs and just can't really be used. So that's arguably the second best regular season player on this team who's a non-factor in the playoffs. Thomas Bryant, who is the other center on this team, sure, we don't even know how healthy he's going to be or how good he'll be when he comes back from injury, but he's not very good defensively, and that's always going to be a concern in the playoffs for a potential backup center or starter, depending on what happens between him and Gafford. Outside of that, then, is Dinwiddie enough to be an elite number 2 guy, or Kuzma a number 2 or number 3 guy alongside Bradley Beal in the playoffs? And can you get that level of offense from them in ISO situations, in clutch situations, when needed? I don't know. I do have concerns regarding that. Davis Bertans hasn't been shooting that well this year again, and is a non-factor when he's not shooting well. Now, as much as this team is deep and has a lot of good players, I do have concerns about them moving forward in a playoff type scenario. I think this is a solid team. I think this is a team that's going to push for the playoffs, no doubt about it, and I think I did underestimate them in that sense because I had them a little bit more just on the outside looking in of the play-in games, with a team like Indiana potentially missing out, or a team like Toronto missing out, which now looks a lot less likely now. But I think the Wizards definitely have to be considered as part of the conversation, but ultimately, I think they're just a regular season team. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I think this is a deep roster with a lot of good bench players, with a lot of depth that can roll a really deep lineup in the regular season, but doesn't quite have the top-end quality that they need long-term in the playoffs. Doesn't have the defense they need at the center alongside Gafford. Because Gafford's only been playing 18 minutes a night this year. Now, he's played good in those minutes, but he's been foul happy for those minutes. 2.5 fouls or 2.2 fouls a game in 17.5 minutes is a lot. And you're also considering the fact that Montrezl Harrell's not going to be playing that much in the playoffs, or at least nowhere near as impactful. Thomas Bryant, we don't know what we're going to get out of him. That was Bertans I don't love in the playoffs. There's a lot of questions and concerns I have about this team in the playoffs, no doubt about it. Their defense, their center play, outside of Daniel Gafford, who's going to pick up those minutes, and do they have enough offense outside of Bradley Beal who can get them buckets in big-time moments? Those are my thoughts, concerns, and questions I have about the Washington Wizards heading into the rest of the season and ultimately the playoffs if they do get there. A good regular season team, no doubt about it, but I think a team that is built for the regular season ultimately and not anything much more than that at this point in time. That's not a bad thing because they definitely have some pieces they can use and move to build towards being a playoff team. But as this team is currently constructed, I don't see this being anywhere near a bit of a threat in the playoffs. So that is my thoughts on the Wizards so far in the early days of the regular season. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new. That being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.